I actually have no idea what I'm doing. But I'm gonna read. I don't know how to say this. I don't know how to say the name in in English because I say it as 将进酒, and I don't know how to pronounce it in English at all. Like, okay, I guess I'll just call it like Ballad of Sword and Wine. And I have to like Google the names of the main characters so I know what's going on. And I guess this is more of a document of my reading progress because I need to lock in. I need to be forced to actually read this. Let me search up the Chinese version. 将进酒. So the main character are Xiao Chiye and Shen Zechuan. Okay. And it's a happy ending, which is good. I guess we just dive right into it, I guess, because I don't know what I'm doing anyway. Oh no, the first word is already, I don't know how to pronounce that. Shen Wei. Shen. Shen Wei. Shen Wei, the prince of Jianxing, suffered a crushing defeat at what river is this? Chashi River in the northeast. The prefecture of Dunzhou's front line fell into empty hands, and 30,000 soldiers were buried alive in the Chashi sinkhole. You're among them, so how is it that you're the only one left alive? Shen Zechuan's eyes were glazed and unfocused. He didn't answer. The interrogator slammed his hands on the table and leaned in, a vicious glint in his eyes. Shen Wei had long been in secret communication with 12 tribes of Bian. What is the name of this? Biansha? Biansha, okay. Shen Wei had long been in secret communication with the 12 tribes of Biansha. He intended to hand the 6 prefectures of Zhongbo, right? Zhongbo, 六州, 对. Zhongbo to our enemies on a silver platter. Together with your Biansha allies, you plan to breach the defenses of... How do I pronounce this word? There are way too many terms. Qudu. Okay. You plan to breach the defenses of Qudu from within and without. This is why the Biansha horsemen spared your life, is it not? Shen Zechuan's dry, chapped lips parted as he struggled to understand the interrogator's words. The jet of his throat bobbed as he answered with difficulty. No. Shen Wei immolated himself to escape judgment. The embroidered uniformed guard has already presented correspondence proving his secret liaisons with the Biansha tribe to the emperor. And yet, boy, you still deny it. Your stubbornness borders on stupidity, the interrogator snapped. Shen Zechuan's head felt heavy, his mind dazed. He had no idea how long it had been since he had last slept. He felt as though he was hanging from a single thread thousands of feet in the air. If he negligently let go for so much as an instant, he would plummet to the ground and be smashed to pieces. The interrogator opened Shen Zechuan's written statement and gave it a cursory glance. You said last night you were able to climb out of the Chashi sinkhole alive because your elder brother protected you. Is that so? The scene swam hazily before Shen Zechuan's eyes. The sinkhole was so deep, countless soldiers packed together within. But even as the pile of corpses grew higher and higher beneath their feet, still they could not reach the edge. No matter how they struggled, they couldn't climb out. The Biansha horsemen surrounded the sinkhole, and the whistle of arrows mingled with the frigid night wind. The blood rose up to his calves as the anguished wails and final gasps of the dying crowded close to his ears. Shen Zechuan's breath came fast and shallow, and he shivered in his seat. He clutched at his hair despite himself, unable to prevent a strangled sob from escaping his throat. You're lying. The interrogator held up the statement and flecked it with a finger. Your brother is Shen Zhou. I don't know what his brother's name is. Let me look. Shen Zhou Ji. Your brother is Shen Zhouji, the eldest lawful son of the Prince of Jianxing. This brother of yours abandoned 30,000 soldiers before the Chashi sinkhole and attempted to stealthily flee from his own private guards. The Biansha horsemen lassoed him with a rope and dragged him to death on a public road along the Chashi River. He was dead by the time the 12 tribes of Biansha slaughtered those soldiers in the sinkhole. It is impossible for him to have saved you. Shen Zechuan's mind was awhirl. The interrogator's voice sounded so far away. All he could hear were the endless wails. Which way out? Where are the reinforcements? The dead crowded against the dead. Putrid, decaying flesh pressed down on his hands. Mu Ge, yes. Mu Ge shielded him from above, sprawled over the bloodied corpses. Shen Zechuan listened to Mu Ge's ragged breaths, and the cries that escaped his throat were those of despair. Your brother is invincible. Ji Mu struggled to squeeze out a smile, but tears were streaming down his face, and his voice hitched as he continued. I'm an impregnable fortress. Hang on just a bit longer. It'll be fine. Reinforcements will arrive soon. When they come, we'll go home and get our parents, and I need to find your sister-in-law. Come clean with it, the interrogator barked, banging on the table. Shen Zechuan began to struggle as if to break free of invisible shackles, but the embroidered uniformed guards swarmed over and pinned him to the table. Since you have arrived in our imperial prison, I have taken your youth into account and have meted out severe punishment. But it seems you don't know what's good for you. Don't blame us if we're ruthless. Men, carry out his punishment. Shen Zechuan's arms were bound with rope. They dragged him to an open space in the chamber. Someone set down a bench with a clatter and tied his legs to it. The burly man beside him lifted his broad wooden staff, hefted it briefly in his hands, and swung it down. Oh, damn. I'll ask you one more time. The interrogator brushed at the foam on his tea with the lid of his cup and took a few unhurried sips. Did Shen Wei collude with our enemies and commit treason? Shen Zechuan gritted his teeth and refused to yield. He shouted between strikes of the heavy staff. No! The interrogator set his cup aside. The Shen clan wouldn't be in this position today if you had shown such fortitude on the battlefield. Continue. Shen Wei didn't collude with the enemy, Shen Zechuan rasped. his head hanging and his voice hoarse. He was crumbling bit by bit. We suffered a crushing defeat at the Battle of Chashi River, all because Shen Wei recklessly met the enemy head-on. After that loss, he had a chance to turn the tide at the Dunzhou front line. Yet despite his great advantage in strength over the enemy troops, he withdrew his forces. Because of this, the three cities of Duan. Why is there so many names? Duanzhou. The three cities of Duanzhou Prefecture fell into enemy hands. Tens of thousands of common citizens lost their lives on the edge of Biansha scimitars. The interrogator heaved a lengthy sigh and continued with rueful disdain. All 6 prefectures of Zhongbo were bathed in blood. Shen Wei took his troops and retreated south again. But the battle he fought in... Oh my god, why are there so many names? Dengzhou. But the battle he fought in Dengzhou Prefecture was the most suspect of all. The Chidong. Chijun. I think it's Chijun. 郡，对，赤郡，启东赤郡。The Chijun commandery garrison from Qidong had already crossed Tianfei watchtower to provide assistance, yet he abandoned this pincer attack. Instead, he mobilized thousands of cavalry to escort his own family to the city of Dancheng. Okay. The entire front line at Dengzhou Prefecture collapsed without these troops. Was this not intentional sabotage? If it weren't for the Li Bei armored cavalry racing 3 days and nights to cross the glacial river, the Biansha horsemen would even now be at the gates of Qudu. Shen Zechuan was drenched in cold sweat, his consciousness fading. The interrogator flung the statement at him in contempt, and it slapped against the back of his head. Rather a dog than a man of Zhongbo, eh? Shen Wei is a sinner before Great Zhou. Great Zhou. Do you yet deny it? You have no choice but to accept your guilt. Shen Zechuan was in agony, half of his body numb. He lay collapsed on the bench, the paper fluttering before his eyes. The ink strokes on it were clear, every character like the humiliating lash of a whip on his face, announcing to the world, Shen Wei betrayed his country. He is less than a dog. They had left the 6 prefectures of Zhongbo piled high with bodies. To date, the corpses at the bottom of the Chashi sinkhole remained uncollected. Everyone in the cities of Dunzhou who might have collected them had been massacred. Shen Wei had burned himself to his death, it was true, but this debt of blood must be borne by a living person. Shen Wei had a harem of wives and concubines who bore him a bounty of sons, but every one of them had perished when the Biansha horsemen entered Dunzhou. Yes. Only because Shen Zechuan was of low birth, raised far from the family, had he managed to escape with his life. I'm going to look at the map right now because I have no idea which... Okay, this is Qudu. And Tianfei Watchtower, Chashi Sinkhole. Okay. This is so confusing. They dragged Shen Zechuan back to his cell, his heels leaving twin trails of blood in their wake. He faced the wall and gazed at a small, narrow window. Outside, the frigid wind howled, and the snow came pelting down. The night, black as pitch, stretched without end. In his head was primal chaos. Amid the cries of the wind, his mind wandered back to the sinkhole. Jimu was dying. His breathing had grown labored. Blood dripped down his armor onto the back of Shen Zechuan's neck, where it quickly turned cold. The wails around him had quieted, leaving only the groans of unendurable pain and the bellows of the biting wind. Shen Zechuan lay nose to nose with a dead man whose features were no longer recognizable. His legs were pinned under the weight of human bodies, a shield dug painfully into his ribs. All he could smell as he gasped for air was the thick stench of blood. He gritted his teeth, tears streaming down his face, but he couldn't afford to cry aloud. In despair, he stared down at a face trampled beyond recognition, yet could not tell if this was a soldier he knew. "Ge," Shen Zichuan sobbed softly. I'm scared." Ji Mu's throat bobbed. He gently patted Shen Zichuan's head. "It's all right. We'll be okay." Shen Zichuan heard the saying of the soldiers at death's door. The gale tore apart the sound of their songs and sent tattered pieces fluttering away into the frigid night. Battle in the city south, death within the city north. Graveless, left exposed to rot. May the crows feed. "Ge," Shen Zichuan whispered beneath him. "I'll carry you on my back. Ge." Ji Mu's body was like a bent and broken shield. He smiled and said in a hoarse voice, "I can walk on my own." "Were you struck by an arrow?" "No." Ji Mu's tears had dried up. He said breezily, "Those biansha baodis have no aim." Shen Zechuan's fingers were soaked in flesh and blood. He wiped his face with some difficulty. "Shi Niang, I guess, Shi Niang. The 10th, I think it's the 10th wife of the patriarch of the family. Shi Niang. Let me check the Chinese translation. Oh no, it's Shi Niang. I thought it's like 10th. Okay, Shi Niang. So that's the wife of the Shifu. Okay. Shi Niang made dumplings. Once we get home, we can eat as many as we like. Ji Mu sighed. I'm a slow eater. Don't snatch. Shen Zechuan gave a firm nod beneath him. The snow gradually blanketed Ji Mu's body. He seemed very tired, so quiet was his voice, and he hadn't even the strength to move his fingers. The song was sung achingly low, and when it reached the line, "The valiant rider died in the fray," Ji Mu closed his eyes. I'll give Ge my money too, to get married, said Shen Zechuan. Ge, Ge. Oh no. Ji Mu remained silent, as if he were weary of listening to Shen Zechuan speak, and couldn't help but drift off. Shen Zechuan trembled all over. He didn't remember when the Biansha horseman left or how he had clawed his way out. When he finally pushed himself up and pulled himself out, it was to dead silence amid the heavy snow. The stacked corpses cushioning his knees had the look of discarded burlap sacks. Shen Zechuan turned to glance down and choked with sobs. Ji Mu's back had been pierced with a dense cluster of arrows, that his body was like a curled hedgehog. Oh no, all his blood had trickled down onto Shen Zechuan's back, but Shen Zechuan hadn't realized it. The thunder of horses' hooves came swiftly toward him like the looming storm. Shen Zechuan shivered and jolted violently awake. He felt like retching, but then he realized his wrists had been firmly bound and a burlap sack filled with soil was pressing down on his body. The sack became heavier and heavier as it crushed his chest. He couldn't make a sound. This was an old prison trick habitually inflicted on prisoners whose jailers would rather see them dead than alive. By smothering them with an earth-filled sack, they would leave no trace of injury. Had Shen Zechuan not woken when he did, by daybreak he would have been but a corpse gone cold. Someone was trying to kill him. What an intense first chapter. This was intense. That's a lot of deaths. Also, it's super confusing. There's so many places and like names. I keep having to look up the Chinese character so I know which word, like how to pronounce it. And it's pretty confusing. I understand why people like kind of turned off by this because this is not as easy to read as like 魔道祖师 or 天官赐福or like Jaffa or like SVSSS, it's not that easy to read. I can see why people are like deterred by it. Okay, in chapter 2. Death by flogging. This is intense. Let me look at the chapter titles. Frigid Wind, How Death by Flogging, Rapture, Last Descendants, Frontline. Okay. There's a reference to like an idiom, like praying mantis and little cicada. Okay. In the gloom of the imperial prison, Shen Zechuan desperately twisted his wrists, but his hands were cold, his lungs were beginning to ache, and the rope was so tight it was futile. The sack of earth pressed down on his chest. He felt as if he had been thrown into a deep pond. His ears rang and his breath came in frantic bursts, like he was drowning. Shen Zechuan shifted his gaze to the candlelight beyond the bars. In the hall, several members of the embroidered uniform guard were drinking and shouting as they played a finger-guessing game, too preoccupied to spare Sun Zechuan a glance. The sack of earth nailed him to the crude straw mat, and suffocating nausea engulfed him like flood water. His vision swam. Shen Zechuan raised his head and gritted his teeth to move his legs. They had been flogged numb. He felt nothing when he raised them. He placed his foot against the left corner of the wooden bed where vermin had eaten away its sturdiness. On his first day, he had damaged it just by sitting down. He struggled to gather a breath. Shen Zechuan braced himself and kicked at the rotten corner with all his strength. His legs were so weak the bed didn't even groan. The planks hadn't moved an inch. Cold sweat streamed down his back, soaking his shirt. When is he going to be finally happy? Because this is so depressing. He yearned to live. Shen Zechuan whimpered frantically. He bit his tongue until it bled and kicked the planks again. Jimu's mangled, barely recognizable body was the horsewhip at his back, spurring him on. His brother's voice echoed in his ears. He must live. Shen Zechuan struck the plank furiously until he finally heard a dull thud. Half the slats collapsed and he slid off to one side, the heavy sack tumbling down beside him. He hit the ground and gasped as if breaking through the water's surface. The ground of his cell was icy. Shen Zechuan's injured legs were useless, so he propped himself up with his elbows. Sweat trickled down the bridge of his nose. Despite the cold of the prison, his body burned as if his insides were coming to a boil. At last, he put his head down to dry heave. Shen Wei deserved to die. There were 120,000 troops in Zhongbo, divided among the 6 prefectures to form a defensive perimeter. After defeat at Chashi River, the Biansha horsemen had invaded Dunzhou. It was as the interrogator said. At that point, there had still been a chance to turn things around. Not only did Shen Wei have a well-trained and powerful army, he had ample provisions and the authority to deploy the garrison troops in the 3 cities of Duanzhou. Yet to everyone's surprise, he had abandoned the prefecture and cowered back into the Dunzhou Prince Manor. This retreat was prelude to the fall of Zhongbo. The Biansha horsemen slaughtered Duanzhou's 3 cities, after which the garrison, their morale shattered, fled south in a panic. Everyone had thought Shen Wei would make his stand against the 12 tribes of Biansha in Dunzhou. Yet he had taken to the road again at first news of their arrival. Time and time again, the Zhongbo army had retreated in defeat, while the Biansha horsemen cut through the 6 prefectures' territories like a steel blade. They traveled light, feeding on the spoils of war as they advanced until they were within 800 li of Qudu, the capital of the Zhou Empire. Had Shen Wei implemented a scorched earth policy during his retreat and burned the granaries in the cities he left behind, there would have been nothing left for the enemy, and no way for the Biansha horsemen to advance so far. The invaders carried no supplies and relied solely on the cities they conquered to replenish their provisions. If the grain had been ash, the Biansha horsemen would have starved. A starving soldier could not fight. The Li Bei The Libe armored cavalry could have seized the chance, crossed the glacial river, and intercepted the Biansha tribe's retreat, while the garrison troops from Qidong, I forgot the name again. Qidong? I need to find the character. I forgot. Qidong. Is it Qidong? Um, 李北齐卫兵和气动气东武对气东 where am I? While the garrison troops from Qidong's 5 commandery sealed off their escape route from Tianfei Watchtower, the Biansha scimitars would have been trapped like turtles in the tub. They wouldn't have survived the winter. But Shen Wei had done none of that. Not only did he abandon any resistance, he abandoned the city granaries still intact. The enemy fed on Zhou grain as they razed Zhou lands. All thanks to Shen Wei, the Biansha horses were well fed enough to herd Zhongbo's common folk and captured soldiers all the way to Chashi River, where the horsemen butchered them all in a single night. Shen Zechuan had escaped by the skin of his teeth. Now that Qu Du wanted to settle accounts, it was obvious that Shen Wei's deployment orders had been unusually sloppy. All signs pointed to his collusion with Biansha. Yet to escape justice, Shen Wei had not only immolated himself, but destroyed any relevant documents along with him. Even the embroidered uniform guard, notoriously effective and efficient in their investigations, were at their wits' end. If the emperor wanted truth, his only recourse was to get answers, at any cost, from the only remaining individual who might know, Shen Zechuan. However, the son of a dancer in Duanzhou, Shen Wei's eighth son of common birth, had no place in the clan, whether in rank or age. The man had too many sons. Shen Zechuan had been sent away to Duanzhou long ago to fend for himself, and Shen Wei had likely forgotten this son's existence. And yet someone wanted to kill him. It was no secret that many wanted him dead. He had been brought to Qudu as a scapegoat for his father. As the last member of the Shen clan in Zhongbo, he was obligated to pay his father's debts. Once his interrogation in the imperial prison was over, the emperor would no doubt offer Shen Zechuan's death as appeasement to the souls of the 30,000 soldiers who lost their lives at Chashi River. Even so, it shouldn't happen through an assassination in the dead of night. Shen Zechuan spat blood and wiped his lips with his thumb. If Shen Wei had indeed conspired with the enemy, then Shen Zechuan's death was only a matter of time. Why bother to assassinate an insignificant common son? Someone in the capital was worried about the interrogation, and if that was the case, then there must be more to the defeat of Shen Wei's troops than met the eye. But Shen Zechuan knew nothing. He had a shifu in Duanzhou. His brother Jimu had been his shifu's only son. To Shen Zechuan, Shen Wei was merely the prince of Jianxing. Shen Zechuan had nothing to do with him, and absolutely no idea whether Shen Wei had committed treason. Nevertheless, he had to deny it. Sprawled on the frigid ground of his cell, he felt even more alert than during the day. He knew he was a felon held by the embroidered uniform guard under imperial edict. All arrest warrants, summons, and official documents came directly from the top, consigning him straight from the hands of who is this guy? Let me look at his name. 萧萧继明萧继明 from from the hands of Xiao Jiming, the heir of Li Bei, to the imperial prison. They had bypassed even the joint tribunal of the three judicial offices, the Ministry of Justice, the Court of Judicial Review, and the Chief Surveillance Bureau. It was clear that the emperor was determined to get to the bottom of this. Who had the guts to risk silencing him before the emperor could complete his interrogation? The bitter wind howled at the dawn. No, the bitter wind howled at the window. In the darkness, Shen Zechuan stared at the wall. He dared not close his eyes again. This is like political intrigue, I guess. Dawn had scarcely broken when Shen Zechuan was escorted back to the hall. A snowstorm raged outside. What's his name? Oh my god. What? 积累 okay. 积累 the interrogator, had been nothing but grim these past few days, yet now he was all smiles as he waited deferentially beside a wooden armchair and served tea with both hands. A fair-faced, beardless old eunuch eunuch sat in a chair, resting his eyes. He wore the official hat of a eunuch in velvet for the wintry weather, with an ornately embroidered Mandarin square on his robe, a gourd at its center to mark the season. His overcoat was draped over his shoulders, and he held an exquisite plum blossom hand warmer of gold and jade. Sensing movements, he opened his eyes and looked at Shen Zechuan. Godfather, Lei bent to say, here is the filthy descendant of the Prince of Jianxing. What is his name? Pan Rugui. Pan Rugui. Pan Rugui eyed Shen Zechuan. What happened here? Pan Rugui was not asking how Shen Zechuan had ended up dirty and stinking, but why Lei hadn't yet pried the hows and wherefores from him. Lei's forehead ran with sweat, but he didn't dare wipe it. Still hunched, he responded, the boy is ignorant. He's been delirious since they brought him back from Zhongbo. Who knows who put him up to it, but he refuses to confess. A felon by His Majesty's own decree. Pan Rugui did not accept the tea. A child no older than 16 sent to the famed imperial prison to be personally interrogated by your esteemed self, and you can't get a confession out of him. Oh, no older than 16. He's 16. That's crazy. Damn. I'm gonna drink some water because my throat hurts. This is intense. Still holding the teacup, Lei smiled sheepishly. His importance is precisely why I didn't dare use harsher methods without authorization. He was already ill when he arrived. If he dies in our hands, the case against Shen Wei will go cold. Pan Rugui scrutinized Shen Zechuan for a moment. We are all our master's dogs. There's no point keeping a dog whose fangs have dulled. I know you have your own challenges, but this is a part of your duty. His Majesty wishes to see him now. This is his way of showing consideration for the embroidered uniformed guard. What do you have to complain about? Ji Lei hurriedly prostrated himself. It is as godfather says, this son has been dully castigated. Pan Rugui snorted. Clean him up. He can't appear before his Majesty covered in filth. An attendant led Shen Zechuan away to wash and bandage his injured legs, then gave him a set of clean cotton clothes. He allowed himself to be shuffled about. He was in such pain he could barely walk, and it took quite an effort to even step up into the carriage. As Shen Zechuan departed, Pan Rugui finally accepted the cup from Ji Lei. Staring after the carriage, he asked, "Is he truly the last of the Shen clan?" "Yes, the sole survivor of the Chashi sinkhole. The heir of Li Bei captured him personally. He was detained in the Li Bei armored cavalry's prisoner wagon the whole day and had no contact with anyone." Pan Rugui sipped his cold tea. After a long time, he gave Ji Lei a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "The heir of Li Bei certainly is discreet." Interesting. What does that mean? That's kind of sus. I want to see what is the direct Chinese. Oh, Xiao Shizi. Oh, that's the other main character, Xiao Chiye. Oh, I see now. Okay. Shen Zechuan stepped down from the carriage and let the guards hustle him down a long path. The heavy snow blew into his face, and the eunuch leading the way hurried along without any unnecessary chatter. When Pan Rugui arrived before Ming Li Hall, his arrival had already been announced. The junior eunuch waiting under the eave stepped forward and took Pan Rugui's overcoat, helped him shrug on his outer robe, and took over the hand warmer. Pan Rugui kowtowed by the door and said, "Your Majesty, this lowly servant has brought the boy." There was a pause. A low and hurried voice rang out, "Bring him in." Shen Zechuan's breath hitched, but they were already dragging him inside. Though there was incense burning, it wasn't stifling. He heard intermittent coughs and caught a glimpse of feet lined up on both sides of the hall. The Xiande emperor was dressed in a deep blue day robe that couldn't hide his frailty. Illness had constantly plagued him in the 3 years since he had ascended the throne. His pallid complexion made his oblong face look all the more gentle and delicate. Ji Lei has been trying him for several days now. The Xiande emperor glanced at Ji Lei, who was kneeling at the back of the hall. "Have you discovered the truth?" Ji Lei kowtowed. "To answer your Majesty, this boy's words are incoherent, and his story is full of holes. Nothing he said can be believed. All of his words are contradictory." "Present his testimony," the emperor commanded. Ji Lei produced a written statement from within his robe and handed it respectfully to Pan Rugui, who in turn hurried forward to present it to the emperor with all due reverence. The Xiande emperor read it through. When he reached the part about the Chashi sinkhole, he covered his mouth and began to cough. He refused to let Pan Rugui help him. Instead, he wiped the blood from his lips himself with a handkerchief. 30,000 soldiers lost their lives in that sinkhole. he said solemnly. Had Shen Wei lived, he would have suffered the wrath of all. Shen Zechuan closed his eyes as his heart began to pound. He already knew what was coming. Raise your head. His breathing quickened. His palms braced against the floor were numb. Shen Zechuan raised his head slowly, his eyes carefully landing on the Xiande emperor's boots. The emperor looked down at him. As Shen Wei's son and the sole survivor of the Chashi sinkhole, what do you have to say? Shen Zechuan's eyes grew red at the rims. He shivered with wordless sobs. The emperor's expression never changed. Speak. As Shen Zechuan raised his head, tears rolled down his cheeks. He glanced up for a fleeting moment, then kowtowed hard again, his shoulders shaking as the sobs rose in his throat. Your Majesty, Your Majesty, my father was devoted to the nation and his countrymen in Zhongbo. He was too ashamed to face them after his losses on the battlefield. That's why he set himself on fire, to atone. What nonsense, the emperor barked. If he was devoted to the nation, why did he retreat time and time again? Shen Zechuan's voice was hoarse from weeping. My father sent all his sons into the field. My eldest brother Shen, what is his name? Shen Zhouji. My eldest brother Shen Zhouji was tortured to death by the Biansha rider who dragged him behind his horse along the Chashi public road. If it were not for undivided loyalty, why risk his own heir? You dare bring up Chashi? Shen Zhouji fled from the front lines. His crime is unpardonable. Shen Zechuan looked up at the emperor, tears leaving tracks down his cheeks. The battle at Chashi was a bloodbath, he rasped. My eldest brother might be incompetent, but he defended Chashire for 3 days. In those 3 days, vital intelligence was able to reach Qidong, Qidong and Libei. If it weren't for those 3 days, he was so choked with emotion he couldn't go on. The emperor reread the statement in his hand. This hall was quiet save for the sound of Shen Zechuan's sobs. In the interminable silence, Shen Zechuan dug his fingernails into flesh. Abruptly, the emperor let out a long sigh. Did Shen Wei collude with the enemy? Never. Shen Zechuan's voice was resolute. The emperor set down the statement and declared in a voice that had gone frigid. This cunning boy attempts to deceive his sovereign. He must not be allowed to live. Pan Rugui, having flogged to death at Duancheng's gate, at Duancheng gate. Yes, your majesty. Pan Rugui immediately bowed and retreated. Shen Zechuan went cold, as if doused with a basin of heavy, icy water. Struggle as he might, it was useless. The guards clamped his mouth shut as they dragged him out of Mingli Hall. Oh, my throat hurts. What amazing first 2 chapters, even though it's really, really confusing. And I fear that I am going to take a break for now because this is so intense and I'm getting kind of tired. It's like 12 a.m. here. So, yeah, I'm ending